It was a typical Friday night at Charlie's Bar, a cozy spot where locals gathered to unwind. The place had a charm to it. A worn wooden bar, dim lighting, and a jukebox that played classic rock. I was working my usual shift, mixing drinks and chatting with the regulars. Around 9 o'clock, the door creaked open, and in walked a guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, wearing a dark trench coat, even though it wasn't that cold outside. His face was partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He took a seat in the corner booth, which was unusual because it was the least popular spot in the bar. It was away from the main area, and you had to practically walk into the dark to see it. The guy didn't order anything, just sat there, staring blankly at the wall. At first, I thought maybe he was just passing through or waiting for someone. But as the hours went by, he remained there, unmoving. It was like he was part of the furniture. I tried to catch a glimpse of his face, but the hat and shadows obscured most of it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The regulars noticed too. Greg, who usually had a boisterous personality, was unusually quiet, and Martha, the bar's most talkative patron, kept glancing over nervously. Even the usual hum of the jukebox seemed to grow quieter, like the presence of the stranger had sucked the energy out of the room. Around midnight, I went to check on him, hoping he'd ordered something and I'd missed it. As I approached the booth, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The guy hadn't moved, but I could swear he was staring straight at me now, though his hat still obscured his eyes. "Can I get you anything?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond. I waited for a moment, then said, "All right, let me know if you need anything." I turned to walk away, but felt his gaze follow me. The rest of the night felt strange. I noticed the lights flickering occasionally, but I brushed it off as a malfunction. The jukebox played songs that weren't on the playlist. It was as if the bar was subtly shifting into something else, something unsettling. When it was time to close up, I noticed the mysterious guy was gone. His booth was empty, except for an old-fashioned pocket watch sitting on the table. It was an intricate piece, silver with delicate engravings. I picked it up, feeling its cold weight in my hand. I thought about putting it in the lost and found, but something about it made me hesitant. I set it down carefully and finished closing up, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As I locked the doors and turned off the lights, I took one last look around, half expecting to see the trench coat guy standing there. With a shiver, I walked to my car and drove home, but the image of that pocket watch stayed with me. Something felt deeply wrong, and I couldn't help but wonder about the man who left it behind and the strange night that seemed to have shifted just a little too far into the realm of the unknown. The next night at Charlie's Bar started off like any other. The weekend crowd was lively, laughter and chatter filling the air as people enjoyed their drinks. I was busy mixing cocktails and chatting with regulars, trying to keep up with the orders. The bar was a well-oiled machine, and everything was running smoothly until the lights flickered. At first, I thought it was just a brief glitch, but the flickering continued intermittently, making the bar feel like it was caught in a strobe effect. I glanced around, but no one seemed particularly concerned. I figured it was just some old wiring acting up and went about my business. Then came the jukebox. It started playing songs that weren't on the playlist. We had a set list of classic rock tracks, but suddenly, tunes from different eras and genres started blasting out. It was like someone had hijacked the machine, and it made the atmosphere feel off-kilter. I tried to manually change the song, but the buttons seemed unresponsive. As I was dealing with the jukebox, Martha, one of our regulars, approached me. She was a middle-aged woman with a kind face, known for her endless chatter about her kids and grandkids. But tonight, she was unusually quiet. "Hey, is everything all right?" I asked her, trying to keep my tone light. "I don't know," she said, glancing nervously towards the back corner. "There's something weird going on." I followed her gaze to the corner booth where the mysterious guy had sat the previous night. It was empty now, but I felt a chill just looking at the spot. I shrugged off her concerns, assuming it was just the atmosphere of the place getting to her. By around 10, I went to check on the office where we kept lost items and other valuables. I wanted to make sure the pocket watch was still there. When I entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop suddenly. It was like a cold draft had swept through, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. I went over to the drawer where I'd left the watch, but to my surprise, it was missing. The drawer was open, and I looked around the office in a mild panic, thinking I might have misplaced it. I searched every nook and cranny, but it was nowhere to be found. I returned to the bar, feeling unsettled. It wasn't just the missing watch, it was everything. The flickering lights, the strange music, and the growing sense of unease among the patrons. I tried to shake it off and focused on my duties. Around midnight, things took a turn for the worse. I was restocking the bar when I heard a faint whispering sound. It was so soft I almost thought I was imagining it. I turned around, but the bar was emptying out, and there was no one around to make such a sound. The whispers seemed to follow me, echoing around corners and in the empty space. My heart was racing, but I tried to stay calm. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. After all, it had been a long night, and I was probably just tired. I finished up my tasks and locked the doors, ready to head home. As I was leaving, I glanced once more towards the corner booth. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a shadow move, but when I looked again, it was gone. Shaking my head, I walked to my car, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread. The next morning, I woke up with a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I couldn't stop thinking about the watch and the strange occurrences from the night before. It was as if a shadow had fallen over Charlie's bar, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The morning after the bizarre events at Charlie's bar, I couldn't get the image of the missing pocket watch out of my mind. I was unsettled and replaying every detail from the night before, trying to piece together what had happened. The feeling that something was deeply wrong gnawed at me, so I decided to return to the bar early to see if I could figure out what was going on. When I arrived, the bar was still locked up. I let myself in and went straight to the back office, hoping to find some clue or perhaps the missing watch. I checked every drawer and cabinet, but it was clear the watch was gone. I sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and dread. As I was about to give up and head to the bar area, I noticed something strange on the floor near the office door, an old photograph partially hidden behind a stack of papers. I picked it up and saw a faded image of a man, looking similar to the mysterious guy from the night before, though the photo was too old to be entirely certain. The man in the photo was wearing a similar trench coat and hat, though it was hard to make out more details due to the photo's condition. I took the photo with me, deciding I might be able to learn more about it later. My next stop was the pawn shop across town, a place I knew occasionally dealt in unusual items. I hoped they might have some information about the pocket watch. The shop was a cluttered mess of old relics, but the owner, Mr. Thompson, was friendly and knowledgeable about antiques. I showed him the photograph and described the watch. His eyes widened slightly as he examined the photo and listened to my description. "I've seen this watch before," he said slowly. "It's a rare piece, and I remember it because of the peculiar stories associated with it." He explained that the watch had once belonged to a man who had vanished mysteriously many years ago. The man was rumored to be involved in some dark dealings, and after his disappearance, the watch was passed around among collectors and enthusiasts of the macabre. Mr. Thompson couldn't provide many details, but suggested I check with local historians or antique collectors who might know more. I left the shop feeling more unsettled than before. I couldn't shake the feeling that the watch was somehow linked to the strange occurrences at the bar. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to dig deeper into the history of the watch and its previous owner. That night, I went to the local library and spent hours poring over old newspapers and records. I found a few articles about the man in the photograph, named Richard Lawson, who had vanished without a trace in the 1970s. The articles mentioned that he had been involved in shady business and had several enemies. The reports were thin on details, but they painted a picture of someone who had made powerful enemies. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night and head home. As I was locking up, my phone rang. It was Martha from the bar. Her voice was shaky as she told me she'd had a troubling dream about the bar. In her dream, the pocket watch was ticking loudly, and every tick grew louder until it became deafening. She woke up feeling like something terrible was going to happen. Her dream added to my growing anxiety. I went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of the pocket watch and the man in the photograph. The watch seemed to be a link to something dark and foreboding. The next day, I decided to return to the bar with renewed determination. I wanted to understand the connection between the watch, the mysterious man, and the unsettling events. Little did I know, I was about to unravel a mystery that would only deepen the eerie atmosphere surrounding Charlie's Bar. The bar was closed for the day, and I was busy with some maintenance work trying to get everything ready for the next night. I felt a bit more at ease after researching the history of the pocket watch, but my sense of unease hadn't completely dissipated. The events from the previous night still haunted me, and I couldn't stop thinking about the missing watch and the shadowy figure who had left it behind. Around mid-afternoon, the bar's phone rang. It was the local police, and they wanted to speak with me about Tom, one of the regulars. I felt my stomach drop as they informed me that Tom hadn't shown up for his usual drink the night before, and they were concerned. They asked if I had seen or heard anything unusual. I told them about the mysterious customer and the strange occurrences in the bar. I mentioned the missing pocket watch and the photograph I'd found, but the police seemed skeptical. They said they'd look into it, but didn't seem to think there was a direct connection. I spent the rest of the day trying to ignore the growing anxiety in my gut. Tom was a familiar face at the bar, someone who was always friendly and punctual. The fact that he was missing made me uneasy, especially with all the strange things happening. By closing time that night, the bar was unusually quiet. The regulars had all left, and I was alone except for a few stragglers who were finishing their drinks. I decided to do one last check of the bar before locking up, just to make sure everything was in order. As I was tidying up, I noticed Tom's usual seat at the bar was empty. I assumed he must have left earlier, but something made me double-check. I walked over to his usual spot and noticed his usual beer mug was still there, half full and untouched. It was out of place, considering Tom never left his drink behind. My unease grew as I looked around the bar. I checked the restrooms and even peeked into the alley behind the bar, but there was no sign of him. I called Tom's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic started to set in, and I called the police again, letting them know Tom was missing. The police arrived quickly, and we conducted a brief search of the area around the bar. They took down my statement and said they'd keep an eye out, but they didn't have much to go on. I was left with a sinking feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. That night, as I was closing up and locking the doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The sense of dread was overwhelming, and I felt as though something was lurking in the shadows, just out of sight. I went home and tried to get some rest, but sleep was elusive. Every creak and groan of my house seemed amplified, and I found myself jumping at every noise. I couldn't stop thinking about Tom and the strange events that had unfolded at the bar. The next morning, I woke up to find a news report about Tom's disappearance. There were no new leads, and the case seemed to be growing colder by the day. The only thing that seemed certain was that something very unsettling was going on, and the missing pocket watch and the mysterious man from the bar were somehow at the center of it all. With a growing sense of urgency, I decided to investigate further. The pocket watch and the strange occurrences at the bar seemed to be linked to Tom's disappearance in some way, and I was determined to find out how. The days after Tom's disappearance felt like they dragged on forever. Every time I walked into Charlie's Bar, the empty seat where Tom used to sit served as a constant reminder of the mystery that had unfolded. The bar's usual lively atmosphere had dimmed, and the patrons seemed more subdued, casting anxious glances towards Tom's vacant spot. I continued my own investigation, digging through old files and local archives, hoping to find some clue that might connect Tom's disappearance to the strange events at the bar. Each day, I combed through records of missing persons and unsolved cases, looking for anything that might give me a lead. But nothing seemed to connect directly to Tom or the pocket watch. One evening, while I was sitting in the bar's office, a thought struck me. Perhaps I had missed something on the security footage. I decided to review the tapes from the night Tom disappeared. I hoped that I might spot something unusual or perhaps get a glimpse of the mysterious man who had left the pocket watch behind. I set up the old VHS player and started the playback. The footage was grainy and often hard to make out, but I scrutinized every frame, watching for any signs of suspicious activity. Hours passed, and I was about to give up when something caught my eye. In one frame, just before Tom vanished, I saw the trench coat guy sitting at the bar for a brief moment. He was talking to Tom, but the conversation was too muffled to hear. I rewound the tape and watched it again, trying to make sense of what I saw. It seemed like the trench coat guy had been leaning in close to Tom, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear the conversation, but the body language suggested something serious. As I continued to watch, the footage showed Tom leaving the bar with a worried expression, glancing back at the trench coat guy. Feeling a surge of frustration and anxiety, I decided to track down anyone who might have seen Tom or the trench coat guy that night. I visited the businesses near the bar, asking around and showing the photograph of Richard Lawson. No one seemed to recognize him, but a few people remembered seeing Tom looking distressed as he left. Determined to find out more, I went back to the pawn shop where Mr. Thompson had mentioned the watch. I showed him the new footage and asked if he recognized the trench coat guy. He took a closer look and said he'd seen a man matching that description in the shop a few weeks ago, asking about rare antiques and old relics. Mr. Thompson also mentioned a local historian, Dr. Patricia Evans, who specialized in the area's unsolved mysteries. I decided to visit her for more insight. Dr. Evans was an elderly woman with a keen interest in local lore and unsolved cases. She listened intently as I described the watch, the mysterious man, and Tom's disappearance. Dr. Evans leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she thought. "You know," she said slowly, "there's a legend in these parts about a cursed object that brings misfortune to those who possess it. It's said that such objects have a way of influencing the fate of those around them. If this watch is indeed one of those cursed items, it could be responsible for Tom's disappearance." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't ready to believe in curses or supernatural explanations, but the pieces seemed to fit. The pocket watch, the mysterious man, and the strange occurrences all pointed to something beyond the ordinary. That night, I returned to the bar, feeling a renewed sense of urgency. The watch was more than just a lost item. It seemed to be a key to understanding the disturbing events that had unfolded. I decided to delve deeper into the watch's history, hoping it might reveal something that could help find Tom and explain the inexplicable happenings at Charlie's bar. The more I dug into the mystery surrounding the pocket watch and Tom's disappearance, the more entangled I felt. Each new piece of information seemed to lead to more questions than answers. My investigation had become an obsession, and I was determined to unravel the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. The next day, I decided to revisit the bar's office. I wanted to go over everything once more, hoping I might spot something I had missed before. The office was small and cluttered, filled with old receipts, dusty records, and forgotten odds and ends. I meticulously sorted through every item, searching for any clue that could shed light on the mystery. While going through the old files, I came across a dusty folder labeled Historical Records. I opened it, hoping to find something useful. Inside, I found old newspapers and articles about the bar and its previous owners. Most of it was mundane, but one article caught my attention. It was about a fire that had occurred at the bar in the late 1980s. The fire had destroyed part of the building, but the bar had been rebuilt shortly after. The article mentioned that during the renovation, several old items were discovered in the rubble, including various antiques and personal effects from previous patrons. The most intriguing detail was that some of these items were sold to local collectors, but others were never accounted for. Could the pocket watch have been among those items? I decided to investigate further and visited the local archives to find more information about the fire and the items that were recovered. I found more details about the renovation and a list of items that had been sold. To my surprise, the list included several rare and valuable pieces, but there was no mention of the pocket watch. It was as if the watch had vanished into thin air. Frustrated, I returned to the pawn shop and showed Mr. Thompson the new information I had found. He looked through his records but couldn't find any trace of the watch being sold or pawned. However, he suggested that I contact a collector named Henry Caldwell, who had a reputation for acquiring rare and unusual items. Mr. Thompson believed Henry might have some information about the watch. I managed to track down Henry Caldwell and arranged a meeting. He was an elderly man with a vast collection of antiques, and he greeted me in his cluttered yet impressive home filled with rare artifacts. I explained the situation and showed him a photograph of the watch, hoping he might recognize it. Henry studied the photo carefully and then nodded slowly. "I've seen this watch before," he said, his voice tinged with curiosity. "It's a rare piece with a troubling history. I've heard rumors about it, that it brings misfortune to those who own it. But I don't know much more than that." Henry told me that he had once considered acquiring the watch, but had decided against it due to the unsettling stories associated with it. He mentioned that there were tales of people who had come into possession of the watch and experienced strange and unfortunate events shortly thereafter. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I pressed Henry for more details. He mentioned a local historian who had researched similar artifacts and might have more information. He provided me with the historian's contact details, and I immediately reached out to set up a meeting. Later that evening, I met with Dr. Patricia Evans again. She was intrigued by the new information and agreed to help. She explained that some artifacts were believed to carry a residual energy or curse that could influence the fate of their owners. This was purely speculative, but it was a recurring theme in many local legends. Dr. Evans suggested that I try to find out more about Richard Lawson's background and any connections he might have had to the watch. She believed that understanding Lawson's history might reveal more about the watch's influence and its connection to Tom's disappearance. As I left Dr. Evans's office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was beginning to piece together the puzzle, but the more I learned, the more unsettling it became. The connection between the pocket watch, the mysterious man, and Tom's disappearance was becoming clearer, but the answers remained elusive. I knew I needed to dig deeper into Richard Lawson's past to uncover the truth and hopefully find a way to resolve the unsettling mystery surrounding Charlie's Bar. Determined to uncover the truth about Richard Lawson and the cursed pocket watch, I dove headfirst into researching Lawson's past. I started by visiting the local historical society, hoping to find more information about his life and the circumstances of his disappearance. The Historical Society was housed in a quaint building with a vast collection of archives and records. The staff was helpful, and I explained my situation, showing them the photograph of Lawson and the details I had gathered so far. They directed me to their records on local residents and historical figures. I spent hours sifting through old documents, newspaper clippings, and personal records. Richard Lawson's name appeared in various articles and reports, but the information was often fragmented. Here's what I found. Richard Lawson had been a well-known figure in the community, but not for the right reasons. He was involved in various shady dealings, often associated with illegal trade and dubious transactions. Several reports mentioned his connections to a secretive group of collectors who dealt in rare and often cursed artifacts. Lawson was rumored to have amassed a collection of valuable items, many of which were believed to carry dark influences. One particular article stood out. It detailed a mysterious fire at Lawson's estate shortly before his disappearance. The fire had destroyed much of his collection and resulted in several unexplained deaths, including that of a close associate of Lawson's. The article hinted at a possible connection between the fire and the artifacts Lawson had been involved with. I took note of the address of Lawson's former estate and decided to visit the location. The estate was located on the outskirts of town, in an area that had fallen into disrepair. The property was now overgrown and abandoned, with an eerie atmosphere that matched the stories I had heard. As I approached the estate, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The overgrown grounds and crumbling walls seemed to hold secrets that had been buried for years. I managed to find an old service entrance that was partially ajar and cautiously made my way inside. The interior was a ghostly reminder of its former grandeur. Dust-covered furniture and faded portraits lined the walls. I carefully explored the rooms, looking for anything that might provide more insight into Lawson's collection and the pocket watch. In what appeared to be a study, I found a hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the wall. Inside, I discovered a collection of old letters, journals, and documents. One journal, in particular, caught my attention. It was filled with entries about Lawson's obsession with certain artifacts and his growing paranoia about their power. The journal detailed a series of events leading up to the fire, including a cryptic entry about a final reckoning and the watch that holds it all together. The more I read, the more it became clear that Lawson believed the artifacts, including the pocket watch, were connected to a series of dark events. The journal hinted that the watch had a central role in his collection and that its influence had become increasingly troubling. I also found a letter addressed to a local historian, Dr. Patricia Evans, whom I had already spoken to. In the letter, Lawson mentioned seeking her expertise to understand the true nature of the watch and its influence. It seemed that Lawson had been desperate to understand the artifact's power and had hoped Dr. Evans could provide answers. Armed with this new information, I returned to Dr. Evans. I shared the details of Lawson's journal and the letter he had written to her. Dr. Evans was visibly intrigued and agreed that the watch's influence was likely tied to Lawson's mysterious disappearance and the unsettling events at the bar. Dr. Evans suggested that the watch might be part of a larger pattern of events tied to Lawson's dealings. She proposed that we delve deeper into the history of similar artifacts and their impact on their owners. I agreed, feeling that we were closing in on the truth but still needing more answers. That night, as I reviewed the information, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of uncovering something deeply disturbing. The connections between Lawson, the pocket watch, and the strange occurrences at the bar were becoming clearer, but the final piece of the puzzle remained elusive. I knew that finding this piece would be crucial to understanding the full extent of the mystery and, hopefully, to finding Tom and resolving the unsettling events that had taken over Charlie's bar. With Dr. Evans's help, I delved deeper into the dark history surrounding Richard Lawson and the pocket watch. We spent hours combing through archives, cross-referencing old articles, and discussing Lawson's findings. The more we uncovered, the more I realized how close we were to solving the mystery. One evening, Dr. Evans called me with a lead she had found. She'd tracked down a rare book on cursed artifacts, which included a section specifically about the pocket watch. The book, long out of print, was held in a private collection at a nearby library. We arranged to meet there to examine the book together. At the library, we found a secluded reading room and carefully reviewed the book. The pages were yellowed with age, and the text was dense with historical accounts and occult references. As we turned the pages, we found a detailed description of the pocket watch, including its history and the various owners who had experienced misfortune. The book described the watch as a vessel of fate, a rare artifact believed to influence the lives of those who possessed it. It detailed a series of events where each owner faced calamities or disappearances, often linked to dark forces or unresolved conflicts. The watch seemed to act as a catalyst for misfortune, affecting not only its owner, but those around them as well. We also found a reference to Richard Lawson's final days before his disappearance. According to the book, Lawson had become increasingly obsessed with the watch and its supposed powers. He had believed that the watch was connected to a series of tragic events, including the fire at his estate. The book hinted that Lawson had attempted to destroy the watch to break its curse, but had failed, resulting in even more chaos. The book concluded with a chilling note. The watch's influence remains, and those who seek to understand it may find themselves trapped by its dark legacy. Feeling a surge of urgency, I returned to Charlie's bar to search for any additional clues. I knew that the answer to Tom's disappearance and the strange events at the bar lay in understanding the watch's influence. I revisited the bar's office, determined to find any remaining pieces of the puzzle. As I reviewed the footage and documents once more, I noticed something I had overlooked before, a small, hidden compartment in the office's desk. Inside, I found an old, dusty envelope with Tom's name on it. The envelope contained a letter written in Tom's handwriting. The letter revealed Tom's fears and suspicions about the watch. He had been investigating its origins and had come across the same book Dr. Evans and I had read. Tom had discovered that the watch was linked to a series of tragic events and had intended to confront the mysterious man about it. The letter ended with a desperate plea for help and a warning to anyone who might find it. The watch's influence is real. If you're reading this, be careful. The watch can change everything. I realized that Tom had been trying to uncover the truth about the watch and had inadvertently put himself in danger. His disappearance was likely a result of his investigation into the cursed artifact. I immediately called Dr. Evans and shared the contents of the letter. Together, we pieced together the final parts of the mystery. The watch, with its dark history and influence, had caused Tom's disappearance and the unsettling events at the bar. The mystery man, likely an accomplice or someone connected to the watch, had played a role in the unfolding drama. With this knowledge, I reached out to the authorities and provided them with the new evidence. The police launched a new investigation into Tom's disappearance, focusing on the connection to the watch and the mysterious man. As I left Charlie's Bar that night, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The mystery had been resolved, but it came with a heavy price. The pocket watch, with its dark legacy, had caused much pain and confusion. I hoped that by exposing the truth, Tom's disappearance would be resolved and the dark influence of the watch would be brought to light. The bar gradually returned to normal, but the memory of the events lingered. The story of the pocket watch and the mysterious man would remain a chilling reminder of how the past can come back to haunt us in unexpected ways.